Hello, welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the podcast that helps you on your writing journey. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'm your host. So today I want to talk about something in publishing that is pretty important for indie authors, but we don't really talk about it a ton, and it's something that you kind of learn when you do it. You rarely ever have anybody teach you how to do it, and that is how to create a cover for your book. You can do this a lot of different ways. As you know, if you walk into a bookstore, you see there's a ton of different kinds of covers. So whenever you're an indie author or a self-published author like myself, what you need to be doing is figuring out what you want your cover to look like, because one of the biggest advantages of being indie is you actually have some control over what your cover looks like. So like part of that is looking at trends, looking at like other book covers, what you want to do, what you want it to sort of like model. If you want it to be like other books in your genre, often you kind of do. You might not for some other reason. It's just sort of like a thing you got to think about. And also, as a bit of a tease, I also plan on doing a cover reveal for my new book, Destined for Greater Things, at the end of the episode. So stay tuned for that. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited to get it out there. So I just want to start out talking about what this process was like for me. I've gone through it twice now. Honestly, more than twice, maybe like 4 or 5 times at this point. But I have been like getting art commissioned and figuring out how to make it work on a cover for quite a little while now. Where I started, and you can start a lot of places, but basically you got to find an artist if you're not an artist, right? That feels obvious, but like it's just the truth. Like if you are not someone who does art yourself, you've got to find somebody who is an artist that has a style that matches with the aesthetic that like you want for your book. So like the way that I did that is I went to Fiverr and I just kind of like searched for artist. I did a fantasy book, so I did a lot of like character stuff. So I like searched for like fantasy D&D art, stuff like that. And I just sort of like kept looking through profiles over and over and over again until I found someone that I was happy with. And I think I have been lucky. I've worked with a couple of artists now, and they both have been great. I've not really had a negative experience with artists from Fiverr. That's not to say nobody ever has. I'm sure because the truth is hiring a freelancer is always a bit of a like gamble, because you never know what you're going to get when you pay for it until you get it. And sometimes it's not all what you expect. And you sort of just have to keep digging until you find what you like. And like I said, sometimes you'll see like they'll post examples of their art. One of them might look great. Then the other 2 or 3 things they posted their examples might not look as great. So you gotta take that sort of thing into consideration, because if they're not putting their best foot forward in every picture, or if that is their best foot forward, then you gotta wonder like, how are they gonna do my art? So when you want to look for somebody who has a lot of art that matches up with the style you're looking for, and make sure that like everything they have kind of looks like what you'd like it to look like. And I mean, like artists can have different styles, obviously, but they all should look good. You should feel like they're all quality before you like actually reach out to an artist to have them do a thing for you. So like I said, I've been very lucky. I have one artist who does kind of like anime inspired stuff. I do that for like a couple of my light novels. I like to have like sort of like manga looking characters on my light novels. And he's been great. He's been really good to work with. And then I have another artist, Deryl Arrazaq, who does, he did the Tyranny of the Fate cover. I'll put that up on the screen. We'll be talking about it here in a second. But he did the Tyranny of the Fate cover. And he also he did do the Destined for Greater Things cover that we'll be revealing later in the episode. So let's talk about how I chose Deryl, because he's an incredible artist, and I don't know that I will ever work with someone else for my main series books, because I just like his work so much. And the thing about finding a freelancer you like is you want to not let them go, because, you know, if they're good, you want to keep them. So this cover here, Tyranny of the Fae, it is my first book that came out. And you'll notice this probably doesn't look like a ton of other fantasy books that you've seen before. But I really like it because I'm a big comic book guy, right? I like sort of like big splashy covers that looks like they could be on a comic or are a scene from a book, or like feel reflective of the book in some way. And I like it when it's artistic, like the lines between them in this one I think are very cool. I like this cover a lot. It's one of my favorite things I've ever worked with before. It's very cool. And, like I also tried to figure out ways to tie this cover into other fantasy novels I've seen before. I mean, think about things like Wheel of Time or like the Forgotten Realms books or like the Dresden Files. Like, those books tend to have a character on the cover. They tend to have a scene that could be in the book on the cover. So I am sort of like following a tradition of like fantasy here, but again, I'm trying to make this my own too, right? Because this looks a little bit different than those covers, and I feel like that's also good. I feel like it's also good to sort of like get something that feels representative of you and your work, and maybe even is a little bit unique. I will say that I feel like it's possible that this book could be getting better sells if I followed the trends a bit more. Like if I had the more like wordy, like the more artistic word covers, because that tends to be what we're seeing in fantasy a lot now. I sort of made a conscious choice to not do that. But like keep that in mind. If that's something like if the cover of your book is something that you're not married to, like if it's a thing that's not really, really important to you, like it is for me, like do something that matches the current trends because you're more likely to get sales that way, just because it communicates to the reader what your book is. And I think that that's important too, right? So then as I shifted into Destined for Greater Things, so Tyranny of the Fae is I call it a collection of short stories. Realistically, it's 3 novellas. There's 3 characters on the cover you will see here. And they are each like, it's sort of like 3 novellas put together into one big book. So I had every main character on the cover. So that's what this is like each of these characters here are characters from Tyranny of the Fae. And I felt like it was important to kind of demonstrate that this was going to be 3 people's story, not, just one story. So Destined for Greater Things, though, is a very different genre. So Destined for Greater Things is my next book coming out. It's the first book I sort of ever started writing. I wrote it it was like the first book I started on. I wrote it probably like the first chapter I wrote maybe like 10 years ago or more. But then I just kept like not being happy with the second chapter, writing it, rewriting it. And then it wasn't until I got my ADHD diagnosis that I was like, all right, I got to like buckle down and actually do something. And that's whenever this turned into a book. But it's a bit of a different genre than Tyranny of the Fae because of that. Like, it has sort of like different themes. Like there's a bit of a romance element, which is like a big part of the book. So I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that in the cover. It's more of an epic fantasy, but it's also kind of lighthearted. So like I wanted to make sure that I sort of like signaled all the different things that Destined is whenever I commissioned the cover for it. So whenever you look at the cover for Destined for Greater Things, and all right, here it is. This is the cover reveal. Destined for Greater Things. So this cover, again, is very cool. I like it a lot. These are 2 of my main characters, Star Sitar and Enzo. You'll see them here sort of like walking in a party. But like 2 characters on a cover signals that either they're on an adventure together or maybe there's something else going on, as there is. It's a romantic thread through the book. And I just sort of like wanted to signal that, and also like tell people like I have a very D&D vibe in the way that I write, and I feel like the covers that I use for both Tyranny of the Fae and for Destined for Greater Things kind of mirror that. Like if you're a D&D person, you'll look at this cover and think, yeah, that's for me. So I'm kind of trying to signal that too. And one thing I will say, I really, really loved working with artists so much. It's really the most, it's a really collaborative process. And it's one of the most fulfilling processes I've ever done as an author in this like publishing business, because like I really get to work with another creative person and create something incredible. And as an indie author, as a self-published author, one of the biggest advantages that I have is like I said, I get some really direct control over this cover. So, whenever I get a character back and maybe the skin color is a little lighter than I'd like it to be, or maybe the face is a little off, or the expression isn't quite what I want it to be, like I can tell them things like, hey, maybe make the skin a little bit darker, maybe have him smile here, maybe have him be a little bit more serious there. And those are things that I think are really important for covers. And like I've heard plenty of authors, especially authors of color, who have written, characters of color, and the covers aren't reflective of that. Like they lighten their skin dramatically. So it's important to me that I'm able to not do that, that I'm able to actually feature characters of color on my covers and ensure that they do look like that. So like I think that kind of thing is really important, and I think that as an indie author, like you should take advantage of that. And like I said, like I don't think that I would have covers that looked like this if I were a traditional author, because like traditional publishers are gonna follow the trends. They just are. Like for me, I love comics. I love like really dynamic covers, and this is not what the current trend is. So like I very likely would not have a cover like this had I not been publishing this myself. So I think that's something to keep in mind too. Like you don't have to follow trends if you're doing something indie. You can do what you want, and that's fine. And don't feel bad about it. Like it's okay. And also the other thing about being indie is like you can always make another cover down the road. If you want to make a secondary cover, if you want to do one that speaks to market a bit more, you can do that, and then you can have one just for you. Like it's also fine to have one just because you want it to look like that. Just think about that. I think that it is like something that indie authors are aware of that they need to do. And also, guys, like you don't have to go to Fiverr. There's plenty of other websites. Reedsy is like a very specific book website that has a lot of freelancers for book related art stuff. And it's for editors, art, whatever. So Reedsy is a good resource. But also, like, there are so many authors who double as cover designers. Lou Willem, who I had on here before, she said that she does covers. So there's plenty of authors who design covers, and a ton of them will like trade services. Like maybe you're somebody who can do sensitivity reading or a proofread. Plenty of artists would trade that for them to put a cover together for you. So like if you don't have a ton of money for your book, like for the production of your book, that is probably fine. You just need to find people that are willing to like trade services with you, because as long as there's something you're good at, and I mean, if you're writing a full book, you're good at something. And like it could be any number of things. Maybe you're good at ARC reader. Maybe people need advanced readers or beta readers. Maybe people need like developmental editors. Like maybe you think in story really well, and you could help them like really think through their story in a way that makes it stronger. So like I helped somebody with blurbs once. Like maybe they aren't as good at writing blurbs and they just want some guidance there, or they just need some help or somebody to bounce ideas off of. So like trading services with authors through like author groups, and like I know that it sounds overwhelming, especially you don't know where to go, but like there are so many indie author groups out there, like Discords and Facebook groups and and God knows what else. You just kind of have to be in the community. Like just ask another author. So if you're listening to this now and you're looking for somewhere to sort of like trade services like that, like just reach out to me on social media. I'd be happy to refer you to the Discords that I'm part of where we do that kind of thing. Because it just makes the process a lot more affordable. It also makes the process a lot more collaborative, and you're able to network with people that do what you do, which is also pretty cool. So yeah, so this is the cover reveal. Destined for Greater Things. We've been talking about how to commission covers, how to decide what you want to do for your cover. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is press@starlightKingPress.com. That you get to the podcast email. Also, mostwritersaretfans.com is the website. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment. If you comment on this video, I'll also see that. So if you want to comment on this video and ask questions about cover design, I'm more than happy to answer it. But thank you guys so much. I'm so happy you guys are on this journey with me. It is a long journey, and it's fun to have people to be on it with. All right, so until next time, I'll talk to you later. Don't be afraid to tell your story.